Hi, I'm Michael Cheika, and we're going on the record. Hello everyone, welcome to On the Record. This is Michael Cheika here, and my guest today, I'm not going to go through his rundown, his list. He's going to only be described as one of the best players of all time in the game of rugby, which is where I got to know him. And he's also a pretty decent fella. He's probably laughing down the other end of the phone right now while I'm doing this. And I'd like to welcome Brian O'Driscoll to the podcast. How are you, mate?
Very good, Coach. Thanks for having me on.
So for all transparency here, I have to tell everyone that I've known Brian for quite a while. First as his footy coach, and then I suppose since I stopped coaching, the great man as a friend and associate and caller. What else would you call us, mate?
I think you got it. You got it there. Yeah,
got it there. Thank you
funny.
very much.
Do you know what?
Yep.
It's weird. You know, over the course of your career, you come across lots of coaches, and I don't know. There's the kind of similarities between so many are they find it quite difficult to do the coaching thing and then kind of come across with a major normality and a kind of a humanity. And I have to say that's probably one thing that connects you to ex-players and those that you've coached is a relationship that kind of went beyond just being a coach and hoping leading teams to success, but also actually having a bit of a laugh and having a good business head and being good crack and just getting it. So that's why anytime you come over here, I always look forward to having dinner. And if you can bring Steph with you, that's even better.
Well, I will say, mate, that the human side of coaching is it is obviously the most important. The technical side, many people can get, but the human side of coaching. And I wasn't sure when I first met you, and I think I talked to you over the phone maybe, or I can't remember exactly. And you were on a tour down here somewhere. And I did send you over to Australia to have a night out with my cousin and all of his mates. So I don't know if that was the most humane thing for me to do, or probably the most sensible thing for me to do as a coach, trying to impress, one of the best players in the world, but got the job done by the sounds of it.
Yeah, good times. We were touring in 06, yeah, we'd been to New Zealand and then across to Australia. And yeah, your cousin Michael, is he Cheika as well, by the way?
Somehow us Lebs, only Lebs could have the same surname, but somehow managed to spell it differently. Right? So I'm Cheika and he's Cheika. Shout out to
anyway,
Gummy.
we had a good time in Sydney. Myself and Shane Horgan, him and a couple of pals. I was around the World Cup as well down there.
Yeah,
where Australia were playing well, and they got beaten by Italy, I think, didn't they, in a quarter-final? So I remember we had a great time.
Yes, Sydney, that's right.
In the soccer, yeah.
That's right. So, mate, tell me.
I had also come to Sydney via a night out in Newcastle with Joey Johns.
You have been out with some of the most iconic people in Australian sport and fashion. There you go, because Michael's a fashionista.
You haven't lived unless you've had a night out in Newcastle with Joey Johns.
Well, I'm going up to Newcastle tomorrow, so you never know. Maybe I will. By the time this podcast is being heard, that'll be well past. So let's hope I get back alive. But how was it anyway, the night out with Andrew?
Yeah, it was good fun. Obviously, he's such a legend, in Australia, but all the more so in Newcastle. And what I couldn't believe, it was a Super Sunday, so we got stuck in early. But what I couldn't believe was, all gave it a good go, and then he was still up at 6 a.m. for a surf the next day. And I think that's what differentiates leagueies from everybody else, is their ability to punish themselves the second day after punish themselves on a night out. Their pain threshold seems incredible. So you put it in, you got to take it out. And for me, I'm only ready for the fetal position after a night on tiles. So that's why I don't think I could have. I wasn't hard enough to play league.
Listen, on the field or off the field, the leagues do it. On the field, they play Origin and then they turn up on Friday to play for their clubs. On that point, did you ever have a league offer in your entire
Yeah, I
time playing
did. Yeah,
rugby? Yeah, who from?
actually, it was when Joey went and played with Warrington. I don't know, it was about 04, 05, just before you came to Leinster. And
Yeah,
yeah, Simon Moran,
yeah,
who owned, I think he owned Warrington,
Warrington, yeah.
suggested I come over and maybe consider it. It was in the middle of Six Nations. It was just the start of their season, so it wasn't going to happen for me. But it was, yeah, I have to say it would have been something I would have loved to have done, to teamed up with Joey and just to try and get into his head to understand how he saw the game and how he saw it ahead of time, and try and working on that same play sheet as him. There's kind of a few players that you feel as though you've managed to get into their headspace, and when you do, it feels the game feels a little bit easier. Easton Asiwa and Leinster would be a prime example of that. It just seemed as though he could tell what was going to happen. Definitely the next phase, and probably two phases ahead.
Yeah, mate. They're the genuine thinkers of the game. I think guys like that. Andrew, even his brother Matthew down here, great league thinking mind. There's plenty of great thinkers out there in our politics as well, as you could imagine. And how do you feel like those great thinking minds have dealt with everything that we've seen this year? COVID, the way we've dealt with this pandemic. How do you feel over in Ireland and probably in the Northern Hemisphere as a whole, leaders have handled the situation?
I think it's very specific to each individual country. I think it's been well broadcast, but that certain countries have really struggled with it. You look at the infection rates and how they've struggled to get control of it. Not over the course of the whole 8 or 9 months of this pandemic. For us personally in Ireland, I felt we had a shift in government halfway through, and I think our government, for the first 3 or 4 months, the leadership was brilliant, the messaging was brilliant. It felt like we were under control. It was all new to us, so it probably was a little bit more palatable, as it has been second time round. But then the new government came in. It was a coalition, a three-party coalition, and they had a disastrous first 3 weeks. There was issue after issue. We had this farcical situation where there was a limitation to the amount of people that could attend events, and then the government golf society hosted an event for 80 people when the max was 50, and so as there was ministers, there was Supreme Court judges in attendance, there was politicians that were there were ministers that were there. It was absolutely insane. So it still rumbled on because the Supreme Court judge that had just been elected a couple of months previously dug his heels in, and it's still ongoing. It's still on the front of the paper today because he's refused to resign, and there's been an inquiry, and it was felt as though it didn't justify the crime, didn't justify being sacked for, but then lots of different people. The Attorney General came in and gave his tuppence worth, and it's just rumbled, and it's just been bad for the court system. But when the public is seeing one set of rules for government and then another set of rules for when you're limited to the amount of people that can go to funerals and to weddings, it's really has kicked up a massive storm.
Yeah, well, consistency, mate. It's like being in a quality footy team. Consistency is everything. That when you can deliver the right message, keep it there, and then believe in it yourself. Do what you say you're going to do yourself. I think that consistency, even here in Oz, I feel like that's lacked often because we've had one set of rules that don't seem to apply across the board. And that lack of consistency has meant that the initial message, which was we're all in this together, well, we're only in this together. We're only all in it together until we're not in it together, and then everyone shoots off. And I think it's probably what we've seen here. A lot of one of the big things here, mate, that has been really big for Australians is that we've noticed how much power the states have. I don't think anyone realised, because the states can block off their own state governments and things like that. Over there, did they ever talk about closing the borders to the island of Ireland as a whole, as opposed to just the Republic or Northern Ireland? Or is it impossible?
They can't do that, can they? Because Northern Ireland, for people that wouldn't be aware, and I'm sure your listenership, probably understands enough that Ireland is made up of the Republic of Northern Ireland and the Northern Ireland part of the UK. So technically, as much as we're an island similar to yourselves, you can't shut things down because you're not going to be there's no border control anymore since the Good Friday Agreement back in '98, and as a result, there's it's easy to pass from Republic to the north, and so how do you stop people from traveling from the UK across to the north when they're working on the under the same government, under the same rules, and then obviously there's going to be the simple case of people, traveling within Ireland for work purposes as well. Like there was some crazy stuff going on a while ago where people from the south were driving up to north and getting flights across to the UK, and then coming back over to Belfast and driving back down, and then not having to quarantine because technically they've gone a correct route. So there's major inconsistencies, and I think that's what really frustrates the public, is particularly when government feel as though they've got one set of rules for themselves and everyone else has to adhere to a different set of rulings. But it does feel as well at times that there's a lot of spitefulness, and in the case of the Supreme Court judge, for instance, that's a body of work, and I'm not saying I'm on one side or the other. What he did was wrong. But that's a body of work to become a Supreme Court judge. And it feels the society we're in now, we're ready to just cut people and cut them away, the talent and the ability of people that have 30, 40 years of experience that will actually add huge value to our society. For one indiscretion, it's like, gone, out of there. We don't want to know you anymore. And with a European commissioner that lost his gig here, who was hugely effective for us in Europe, because he was at this dinner as well. And I don't know what the answer is, because you don't want government to feel as though ministers to feel they can get away with it. But at the same time, you don't want to lose your clout in a bigger picture. And I think that's where we have to be a bit careful not to cut our nose off to spite our face.
Yeah, but mate, do you think that, is that surely your next door neighbour or the guys you're talking to down at the pub or at your place of work or with Amy, your wife, when you talk about it, surely you're not sitting next to each other saying, well, that Supreme Court judge has got to go because he did X, Y, and Z. Is it not the media, and I know you work in the media, is it not more the media that's taken over a little bit of how we think, or a lot of how we think? Because those are the campaigns that are driving the knowledge that most people wouldn't even know otherwise. And you're 100% right in the fact that you say all that expertise all of a sudden is out the window.
But do you know what it is? It's opposition government. It's argumentative. It's not seeing the bigger picture. But I understand the frustration with people at the same time. That's the thing. Where particularly, I'm lucky that I haven't been personally. I haven't lost any loved one. But imagine that not being able to watching a relative, their last service being given on Zoom or online. Because there was a limit to the amount of people being tested or able to attend, and yet this is a golf dinner that we're talking about. So I totally get people's frustrations, but you have to put it into context as to how important these individuals are for the overall picture of the country and for our progression too. So rather than sharpening knives the whole time, I think we've got to think a little bit about the effect that these decisions will have on us as a whole.
Yeah. The society's become ultra judgmental, and the bigger body can do that now because of the ability to get opinions across so easily. You've just got to hit the Twitter account or one of those social media platforms, and so you can be judging anything at any time. A picture that you see of someone on their social life or a judge. And it's never been a case where everyone can have judgment in such a broad, I suppose, view and then create almost a movement behind that judgment. And it's not often qualified with all the facts. And I think that's a huge part about democracy, is that democracy needs facts, a set of facts to work. And then when those facts can be debated and everyone can have a say. But now the facts are getting unclear. There's your set of facts and there's their set of facts, and no one's really sure which are the right ones.
But it's not the issue with journalism now, the double fact checking, journalistic, scope would be ordinarily to find two sources for any piece of information. I think now people, hear something, or someone in the street can be a journalist, and bang, they post it on social media, not understanding the full circumstances of the situation, and immediately it's a blame game before actually realizing the impact of what they're saying or doing will have on someone's life or on an element of society. So I think it's a very precarious place that we're in from a democratic point of view, where now you've also got your man over in the States, questioning the real media and fake media, and you look at 73 million people voted for him. So like it's a really frightening place, because this wedge has been driven in between different factions of society, and they're at loggerheads with one another. There's no, it's black and white. There's no gray area anymore. There's no ability to be able to agree to disagree. It's just like, you're wrong, we're right, end of, and you're crazy, the radical left versus the conservative right, and it's that polar opposites is becoming a real issue in society, no more so than over there.
Yeah, well, truth is becoming a bit of a victim, isn't it, at the end of the day? Truth is becoming the victim of all this stuff. But I want to change tack a little bit. And I said we weren't going to be judgmental. Too many people are judging. But I do want you to explain to me what it was like to spend a night in the Tombs in New York. Just the one night. I want to know what, because I'm a massive Law and Order fan, right? I love that show. I watch enough episodes, and they're always saying, I'm going to send someone to the Tombs. You're coming to the Tombs, or Rikers, right? Or one of those prisons. So I need to know how you felt. I don't need to know the circumstances. I don't want to know why. I just want to know, how did you feel when you were taken to the Tombs?
Can you preface that by saying that I was fully exonerated for any wrongdoing? So let's
okay, hang on. For everyone, the waiver here is he was fully exonerated from any wrongdoing. Remember, I did receive a call from the United States, Collect, I think it was. Collect. But I just want to know what it felt like.
Do you know this?
Because I'd be petrified of going.
The Tombs closed about 3 months ago. Did you hear that?
No, I didn't know.
I got a text from an American friend that helped.
So I thought you got a frequent flyers membership there or something. They inform you once they're closed, like the airport lounge.
To give you a quick snapshot, anyway,
yes.
I got arrested incorrectly, and then I'm brought to a certain precinct, and then put in there for a while, and I'm being told, I think I have to give the laces in my shoes, and I take a couple of, I have to hand over my phone and my belt and everything, and then I get one of the lads, one of my old teammates, to buy. I was like, I don't know what you're meant to do in here. I don't know how long I'm going to be here. So he goes to the vending machine and buys me a muffin. I was like, thanks a million, just what I want. I'm starving. I've just been arrested incorrectly. I'm starving. Can't wait to get my next meal into me. So anyway, I go into that cell. I'm in a cell on my own, and then it gets to whatever, I don't know, 12:30. I'm in there 2 hours maybe, and then we get brought out, and we're being brought to the Tombs. So we get handcuffed and ankle cuffed to other people. So the guy that I get ankle cuffed only has one shoe on. I was like, oh my God, how did it come to this? So anyway, we're brought into the Tombs, and we're all lined up for, you know, the usual side profile, you know, we get our, you know, our photos taken, and then we're thrown into pens, and there's 4 of them, and I'm guessing there were about 25 people in my one. There's benches all around the sides of it, but they're all taken up by people that have been there for, you know, varying periods of time. My understanding was there were guys that had been in there for 28, 29 days at that point. Yeah, there had, yeah. And then, you know, I find a spot in the middle of the floor, and like one of the guys, an old guy in his 70s, I'd say, 60s, 70s, having the DTs beside me, and like just constantly farting and like and twitching at the same time. I'm like, am I meant to be getting some shut eye here? What do you do? Like, it's the middle of the night, and I don't actually know what the rules are as to what you're meant to do. And then I'd been given a phone number, so I went up and tried to make a call, and obviously the number wasn't working, so I was missing a digit, and I was afraid to talk to anyone. And then eventually, a few hours into it, some guy said to me, are you in for fighting? And I was like, I wasn't going to explain. I was like, yeah, I was. And I said, listen, will you look at this number? What am I missing there? Oh, you're missing a 2 at the front. So then I called and made contact with the outside, and that kind of sped up the process of trying to get myself out. The problem was it was a Friday night, it was a bank holiday Monday, and they had a quick court viewing on Saturday morning for like an hour or 2, but then I would have been in until Tuesday if I hadn't had some very good American friends that were able to help me, help me get out and enjoy the rest of my New York weekend, which I certainly did not do. The stress of it.
Were you genuinely scared?
Oh my gosh! Like, do you know what? It's conversation that you would not believe you could hear.
Mate, that's why I'm asking about
killing people. Yeah. Lads talking about, you know, killing guys and, you know, drug deals, and there's so much fronting, and I was like, I was just kind of going, you got to remember these stories, Brian.
Yes.
There was one guy, right, not in our pen, but in the next one, and he was having a conversation, and obviously we could only hear one side of it. But basically, he was having this conversation with the mother of his newborn child, but it came to light that she wasn't going to come in and bail him out, and that she then was having an affair with one of his best friends. And so, like, the whole cell was laughing at this. And this guy was having a conversation as if he was on his own in his living room, and he was appalled. But yeah, and it didn't bother him that everyone was laughing at it too. He was like, oh my God, this guy, he's been sold down the river by his missus. You won't come in and collect him. Anyway, I wonder when we're going to get our sandwiches. You know, it was... No,
I have always thought about it ever since I've been watching those crime shows. What would it be like it's got a terrible name anyway, the Tubes. But the question would be is if it could be the similar type of fear that you encounter when you come up for a big game rivalry. And you've had plenty of those, and I've been involved in some of them. For those that are listening that don't know, Brian played for many times for Leinster, which are now the premier team in Europe. I think they've won the most European championships in all of Europe, maybe equal with one of the other teams. Supremely successful under his stewardship. And then, but their arch enemy is Leinster is the province, which is Dublin is the capital, and the province next door is a province called Munster, which is, when I turned up there, arch enemies, to say the least. And I suppose I felt there was a genuine dislike between when the players from Leinster come up to play against the players from Munster. There was a genuine dislike, and then those guys had to come together to play for Ireland and represent their country against the rest of the world. So I want to ask you, mate, how does that work for you? Because I could see it was no love lost when the games are on between the teams, but then when you got together, there seemed to be a very, very strong bond. So how did that work?
Yeah, I think you just have to be willing to put your rivalries, leave them at the door. Yeah, there was this huge rivalry between the two. You know, Munster, in fairness to them, probably drove the standards of Irish rugby early on in the early 2000s. They were the ones that were regularly in European quarterfinals, semi-finals, finals before they eventually managed to win it. So, you know, in some ways, we kind of begrudged their success and their never say die attitude. But then, you know, when you go into the international game, you get all of those qualities, and you're trying to marry your own skill set with what they can provide. So I think it is. It's a bit of a switch that you flick, and players have to do it all over the world. You know, in soccer, in rugby league, you know, you talk about those Origin games, but then they'll play for the Kangaroos together. So it is something that you're capable of doing. It's a mindset piece, but doesn't mean that when you don't play against them. Like I always would have tried to earmark the big players for Munster to make a point of getting a big shot on them or have a big carry over them or try and impact myself upon them, because I know that has an impact on the rest of their team, that they're go-to players. So I'd always try and single one out. And you know, one of their talisman was kind of vice captain in Ireland under my captaincy in Paul O'Connell. And any time I identified that I could get a good shot, fly out of the line and hit him ball and all, I always tried to do that, because it was just about putting down a marker, that, you know, we weren't what they perceived us to be, that we were a bit of a soft touch. And it took a while for us to shed that title, but we got there eventually. And now you look at the success of the provincial team, and we're the envy of certainly of the countries in Ireland, or the provinces in Ireland, and largely around Europe, about the consistency of performance. And you know, we have to struggle through some tough years even before you arrived, and even the first couple of years when you were there, to eventually get to the point where we were never going to look back.
What about when you throw the third piece of a four-piece puzzle, I suppose, into the mix, that being Ulster? And so Ulster, if I'm not wrong, is a mix of counties, some in the Republic, some in the North. For those that are listening that don't know, when the Irish rugby team plays, they play two anthems. They play the Irish Republic's national anthem, and then they have a special anthem that's dedicated to the rugby team, which explains how the congregation of the four provinces came together and play under the one banner, even though in a certain way you're split across two different countries. What I know that you recently were involved in a documentary around playing for a united team in what is often not a united country. So how does that enter the mix when you're the captain, when you're trying to control and bring together a whole different group, people who come from very different backgrounds, and put them behind one banner with one goal?
Yeah, it's good. It's a good question, and I think that was part of the discovery. You know, at the risk of sounding like an X Factor contestant, it was kind of that journey that I wanted to be on in the documentary, where I was finding out in real time what it was like for players, more so in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, when the Troubles in the North was at its worst. You know, the sacrifices that they were making to play for the national team, and to understand what they saw themselves as. I obviously spent a lot of time up in the North, you know, conversing with players, current players, ex-players. I went to a July 12th march, which is an Orange Order march, staunch, Protestant, staunch, British, you know, individuals that would certainly see themselves as British first and foremost, yep. And kind of the antithesis of what republicanism is about. So, you know, to get a sense as to how all of these different groups of society amalgamated under the banner of playing, and supporting the Irish rugby team. And it's quite amazing to think that, when I went up and interviewed someone at the Orange Order, I asked, what nationality are you? He said, well, I'm Northern Irish, I'm Irish, and I'm British. I said, how can you be three things? I just am.
Yep.
And I said, what does it feel like going down and supporting Ireland? Down in Lansdowne Road, and you know that you're going to be cheering beside, a staunch Catholic. And he said, it doesn't bother me because it's Ireland. We're all pulling together. And I said, does it mean more when when you're playing against England? Oh, does it what? Like, how does that make sense? You see yourself as British, but yet the English game is the most important one. Oh, it is, yeah. And I think it's what society, for me, it's what society is missing a little bit, is the need to accept, right? You don't have to understand, but you've got to be able to accept that this is the way people think and that you have to roll with it. And you're going to have, the Irish support network of the team is made up of different factions of society. And it doesn't matter where you're from, provided you're pulling in the same direction, you're cheering players, from Munster and Ulster as much as you are from Leinster and Connacht. It doesn't matter. And like some of the stories about, Willie John McBride on Bloody Sunday, running out of the bank and not sure which way to run because there were car bombs going off right, left, and centre. And another player who played with the Lions in the 80s, a guy called Davey Irwin, was caught in a bomb scenario where the IRA were attempting to blow up a car a judge was in, and which they unfortunately succeeded in doing, killing Judge Gibson. But in a sliding doors moment, they were, three Irish rugby players were coming from the north down south to a training session, and just the timing happened to be, coincided with the bomb going off and the judge being killed with his wife. And one of these players never played for Ireland again. All three of them survived, but they had to pull one of the players out of the wreckage, never played for Ireland again. But these guys went on to continue playing for Ireland in the World Cup in 1987. Like, it's an amazing story. Got, special branch police sleeping outside the rooms of certain players because there were very real threats on their lives. Like, to play for your country. So it was a voyage for me. It was a voyage of discovery, of understanding what it meant to people to play for the national team, and what it felt being Irish, being Northern Irish, being British, and how they saw themselves. It was a really fun project to be involved in, and I learned so much myself.
Yeah, mate, it sounds amazing just from what you're explaining to me there. It broadened. Like, they're the real leaders, I think, the people who can define themselves in more than just one thing, and be a part of this movement, but understand the other person's movement and have that is getting close to utopia. We were talking about the absolute opposite before when we were talking about, hard left to hard right, and talking about what's going on in the States. But then you hear those stories of what those people are doing, and you go, that's the type of leadership we actually need, is people who can understand and consider and acknowledge people from all walks of life, because there's such a varied group inside our communities nowadays.
It's difficult on certain. Don't get me wrong. I find it difficult to understand people's perspectives sometimes on some areas, and I know there's Jesus, being a very topical one down in Australia, and you were affected by it. But for me, on homophobia, like, it's non-negotiable, and people that, I find it very difficult to accept an opinion that that gay people would not have equal rights and shouldn't have the same quality of life and relationship that married people. And that's my own personal opinion. I find it very difficult to accept other people's decision contrary to that, but you have to. I might be disgusted and appalled by it, but I'm not going to, how do you, I think you have to go, well, that's their thing, and I wouldn't want to associate personally with people that think as strongly as that, to be honest with you. And I would be selective on that front.
Yeah, but that's just, you can choose to do that. And at the same time, you don't need to bomb their opinion or discriminate their opinion,
No,
because that's their
correct.
thing. And that's the balance you want. And
Yeah,
it's like
correct.
most things in life, mate, balance,
It is. It's about just disassociating yourself with people like that rather than having to target them or go after them in a kind of a dangerous way as being primed over the sea again.
Yeah, mate, I think that those people coming from different groups that are able to come together and put their differences aside to go towards a common goal. I think I'm so into that stuff, because obviously footy, it's a huge thing. But I think in society, if we could do a bit more of that, we'd achieve a lot more. It really was when you were talking about the rugby part of that before, with the boys from Northern Ireland and all from Ulster, and then Leinster and Connacht and Munster. It reminded me of probably one of the best days I've ever spent in a rugby stadium, and it was a game that I was never involved in. That was the game which Ireland, played against England at the home of the Catholic games, the Gaelic games, Croke Park. So for those that don't know, that obviously rugby's an English game in its origin per se, and it's Ireland has a set of games called the Gaelic games, which have Gaelic football and hurling as their main protagonist sports. And they are played in a stadium called Croke Park in the big games. Obviously, there's a lot around the country, but their home, I suppose, their mecca is Croke Park. And Croke Park has this huge, significant history from way back in the earlier part of last century, in specifically towards the Civil War in Ireland, where Catholics were killed at Croke Park in retaliation to an IRA assassination plots, and then there was further recriminations afterwards. I'll only brief. I'm not going to pretend to know the whole story, but obviously the history of that ground is huge. And Brian's Ireland team because Lansdowne Warriors being renovated, which is the home of Irish rugby, Brian's Irish team played against England. I think it was the 24th of February 2007, and it was electric. I don't like going to the games. I was invited to a very nice corporate suite, mind you, at the Croke Park. It was very nice, lunch and everything like that. But the atmosphere was electric. Going to the ground, it's something like I haven't really felt before that day. How was it? What was it like?
Yeah, it's exactly as you say it, and first of all, good nerding there on your detail. I look back on it as one of the really great days in an Irish jersey. Obviously you judge yourself playing internationally on success and on trophies, and so probably winning the Grand Slam is the best day that I look back on. But a very close second is that one-off game against England. The atmosphere, it was way more than a sporting piece. It was a social piece. It was, the pages were littered with articles from front to back on this historic moment. I'd missed the opportunity to play in Croke Park as a 12-year-old, where I'd left my old national school, and our Gaelic football team got to Croke Park to play in a final, and I left a year early to go and play in Blackrock College, which I went in secondary school. So I was like, I can't believe I've missed the opportunity to play in Croke Park. So when it came around again, it was such a huge honour for me. And 2 weeks previously, we'd played against France and lost in the last play of the game. So it was almost a double whammy. The thought about having England come over and respecting the national anthem, you could hear a pin drop while God Save the Queen was played, and there'd been so many column inches written about that. How was it going to be received? But with utmost respect. and then to go out and put in a performance, an intensity that I just, it was so unique, and just shows how much emotion plays a part in Test match football. I remember the bus journey from the Shelbourne, which is not far in the centre of town, down to the Aviva. It was silence on the bus, absolute silence. Everyone was just looking out and just seeing the energy from outside and feeding off, and it kind of felt as though words would have been hollow to have had a conversation. A lot of the time you try and pass the time, whereas this was just about trying to soak up the atmosphere and appreciate the enormity of what the occasion was. So yeah, it was an occasion really for the memories, and one that you look back on and got some press clippings of, and occasionally someone meets you in the street and says, I was there that day, and then to go and have a record scoring performance against England kind of topped it all off. But it just felt like a game that we were never ever going to lose.
No, you didn't think it. And on the way to the ground, if you were England going to the ground, you almost would have wanted to turn the bus around and go home, because there was a lot of controversy in the lead up about whether there would be something happen when the English anthem was playing. There was every conspiracy theory and everything came out, like all different types of theories. This could happen, that could happen. And at the end of the day, I think it's the day that the Irish people showed who they really are. You know what I mean? Not only did they respect, and as a foreigner, this is a person from the outside, they handled all of that expectation and pressure from outside and from media and all of that. They respected, obviously, the anthem and the team, and then the Irish team, absolutely. For those that don't know, they pumped England. The England weren't in the game. You couldn't have won that game. Didn't matter who you were, because of the energy that was coming from the crowd and from the players at the same time. It was a pretty amazing day. That is for sure. It's a story you could definitely tell your kids, no doubt about it. How is fatherhood?
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, it's great. I'm, loving it. My kids are at such a great age now at the moment. My little boy is 6 tomorrow, and my little girl is 7. It's been. I thought that my final year that I had. It was a long run into my retirement. Well, my boy has eclipsed that with how protracted this birthday celebration and how far out he has earmarked this. It's like we've been dealing with calendars, like every morning, Dad, check on your phone how many days to my birthday. Still 75, Billy. But yeah, I hope it lives up to the expectations that he set.
I'm sure you'll be under some pressure to deliver.
Well, my wife was up making figurines last night for his cake, and my mother is making the cake later on. So I'm going to go across the other side of the city and collect that. We've got some pals meeting down the park, because you can't have anyone in your house at the moment. So we can meet down the park, and they're bubbles within their class as well. So you kind of handpick 3 or 4 of them and go down and just be able to sing happy birthday down there. And yeah, listen, life's good, but you live your life vicariously through your kids in many ways, and it's a great existence, because I remember thinking the first couple of years of parenthood is challenging, because you don't get a whole lot back, and then they start developing little personalities and they start shaping themselves, and you think, God, I wish I could hang on to this phase forever. It's so much fun, particularly kind of 4 or 5-ish, and then it gets better with every year, because you see them develop, you see the sense of humor is coming, you have a laugh with them, they're telling jokes, and they start getting you a little bit more and understanding the world and figuring it out themselves. It's definitely the best part of existence is parenthood, for sure.
Very good, mate. That's very good to hear. You spoke there just before about your last year and the lead up to your retirement, etc. How was it? How was retirement? How did you deal? Like when you've played so much, you've had so much success, you get addicted to it, I imagine. So how did that go for you? finishing playing footy?
I think the first year is okay, the first year where you're able to take advantage of all the invites and the cool things that you weren't able to do. I almost, when was it, in 2013? So I retired in the summer 2014 or whenever it was, May 2014. In November 2013, we obviously had November internationals, but I got an invite to go and play at Augusta, and I almost retired on the spot there and then. I was like, whatever about these last 7 or 8 months, I'm getting to play Augusta, but I had to kick that one to touch, and the invite hasn't come subsequently.
Come back, yeah.
So, but there's that first year I got to go to Wimbledon and got to travel, to kind of Grand Prix and do all really cool stuff. And then you do a full calendar year of all that, and you go, that was great. But it wasn't playing, international football. That is the ultimate, and the sense of achievement in that. I think that's where I struggled with, and I was lucky that I had lots of opportunity after I finished. But for me, it's the adding that value to the things that you're moving into to the same degree as you did to football. I found that challenging because I knew my quality wasn't as good, and trying to learn on the hoof, but then feel as though you can deliver at a world-class level, and you're not there. I think I struggled with that a bit. And listen, I definitely found it hard. Probably for the first 3 years, I thought it was challenging. You're kind of torn between the emotions of wanting the team to go really well and the ego wanting to be missed a little bit. And then I think, as time passes on, you get over it, and, you become a fan like everybody else. I'm obviously in the media, and I find that still challenging, being critical of, my teammates. There aren't that many of them still left, the guys that I would have soldiered with. So, less and less of them are playing. But that kind of wrangles with me still, of trying to make sure I'm not being disingenuous to my role, but at the same time, not being excessively critical of those that I've shared really great times with.
Yeah, mate, there's been a lot of talk down here around the sporting world of, the mental health of sports people in our games, rugby, and in rugby league as well, while they're playing, but probably more once retirement comes, and how you deal with that. We've had, some serious cases of that, that have been pretty overt over the last few years. Do you think that is becoming more of an issue because of the way the game's going? Is it any different to it was before? Have you seen it? What's your... I know that you're interested in this area, so I just wanted to get your take a little bit on how sports people can keep positive, good mental health and not suffer from the different parts that can affect you either during your career or post.
Well, I think it's really important, there's a few parts to this. First of all, I think the Australian Players Union are a front runner with preparing their players for the second part of life. There's very, very few rugby players, if any, that are going to make enough money to live off for the rest of their days. You're going to have to do something else. And the worst thing you could do is finish one day and go, okay, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? So there has to be a progression throughout your playing days to upskill yourself, or work on some of your passion plays, and hopefully setting up a business, or having an idea of what areas you want to go into. Get some work experience on your day off once a week in an area that you feel as though you might look to be involved in when you're done. So I think that is all vitally important. I think the conversation piece around mental health from in society, and definitely in rugby, because it's perceived as quite a macho sport, I think you have to have your role models, current players, talking about it. About the fact that it's okay to feel a little bit off. We've got a great program going at the moment called Tackle Your Feelings, and it's stories of a lot of current players that have struggled in the past. Some, I can just think off the top of my head, one of the guys lost his brother to suicide. People feeling low, anxious, and low forms of depression around it might seem insignificant, but selection or non-selection, and all of those aspects. You can't throw a net over all of them. The individuals are different, and it's very important that what might perceive to be a brilliant situation for someone having a happy marriage and a great work balance life and lovely kids, but yet they just feel low, and you can't. It's hard for people from the outside to go, why, what reasons has he got to feel low? It's just something that is a weight down on some people's shoulders, and as a society, we have to appreciate that that's just the case with people, and we need to champion the conversation around it. We've got to treat our mental health like we treat our physical health and our dental health on a daily basis. We got to make sure that it's not just perceived to be a negative, that mental health can be a good thing. Yeah. I've actually, to pay respect to, I've actually got pretty good mental health today. I feel good. And to not see that always mental health is, bad. You've got to spin it on its head, but you've got to give it the time and the space to actually work on it as well. Like we work on our physical health via our diet and our nutrition and our exercise. You've got to help that by working whatever works for you, mindfulness, positive thinking, sharing your thoughts with someone, speaking to someone on a professional basis, speaking to a friend. So I think all these things are starting to the penny's dropping with them, but it feels as though there's more work to be done as well within corporate and definitely within rugby circles as well.
Yeah, it's like the what you're talking about. If there's the counterfeit to that, it's the people who might say, well, if you make a deal of it or you talk about it, well, then it will become an issue. And I really think that what you're saying, like once it becomes normal, like it's normal, it should be talked about. The good feeling, bad feeling, ill feeling, that the ability to have the confidence to talk about it to other people will help. We're dealing with so many more things these days than in the past years. And when I talk about that, I talk about, like, back to what we were talking about before around the advancement of technology and how our brains can't, and I imagine our emotions can't advance. I'm certainly not a scientist, but I just guessing based on previous track record that it can't advance as quickly as the technology is advancing, and the amount of messages and signals that we're receiving from other people, it's causing a whole different set of challenges for people to meet. So it's not the same as it was before. Yeah. And I think that's something that when we're confronted with that challenge that we've got to put up, we've got to say the challenge isn't the same as it was 20 years ago. It's totally different now, the challenge on this area. And I think that you made some bloody good points there around
but also
what we need to do.
With regard to, social media has a huge amount to answer for as well with regard to mental state. And, people looking online at the lives of others or the achievements of others and judging themselves on the back of that. It's funny, I'm involved in social media and in Twitter and on Instagram, and every so often I'll have a cull of people, or I'll just mute people that don't add value to my life, that I find myself either being a bit sneery or the people that antagonize me or that I don't think are good for my mental health as well, that they're whatever they're projecting doesn't feel as though it's real to their full existence, that it's only the good stuff. And I think it's such a dangerous place, particularly for your kids, of seeing all these influencers of projecting pictures of themselves that are completely modified, and just this version of the world that I think is very dangerous, where it's all about aesthetics, it's all about how I look, and I think social media has a huge amount to to answer for on that front. So we have to be very vigilant as parents in particular, and our generation, to make sure that we do shape and hone the perspectives of our kids as well, and don't let them kind of fall into that category of what's perceived to be acceptable now, where in our world it really isn't acceptable.
No, and mate, I think you got to use the same rules as you would in the real world, because that is a real world. So someone who's projecting if it's real time and someone's projecting an image or an idea or a thought or a judgment that you don't want, you're not going to let that person into your house to tell you, are you?
Yeah.
If they're knocking on the door, you're going to tell them to go away, or you're not going to let them into your world. But we tend, because they're not there, to let them into our world in this social media. I wouldn't be an expert in it now, but in that social media environment or atmosphere, we let anything in. And it's like, well, no, you can't curate because that's not authentic. Well, you wouldn't let that person into your house, or you wouldn't let them in your car to come to dinner with you if that's what they were doing to you in real time. So why do we change our what we think is acceptable because it's coming off our phone?
But I think as well, the problem was ignorance was bliss in the past. People had these thoughts about you, but they'd no access to actually getting to you. Whereas now, by posting something and not thinking about how hurtful it might be, that you don't realize the impact that can have on people. And I think that's why, we talk about kindness, and no more so than during this period of time, of trying to be kind to one another. I always think about the negative, even in my punditry, of trying to be fair but not being unkind, and try and balance it through to someone's ability, where they might have had a poor game, where it's uncharacteristic, or you wish them well for the next game if they get their opportunity, rather than just always constantly having the knife in and being scathing, because that has a detrimental effect to their confidence and to their self-belief. And you don't realize the power of a tweet, of a post under something, where you might be, to some people, for those that aren't mentally maybe as vigilant or as strong, where one negative comment amongst 25 or 30 positive comments is the one that shines through.
Yeah, especially if you've got a position where you have a voice in the media or something like that. I know that in my own position here right now, where I've been with Argentina in a tournament here, coaching with Argentina in a tournament here where we're playing against my country, Australia, where I've had a lot of messages or texts from journalists or whatever, and they're all looking for the negative thing that I would say about my own country. When, if they were in the team meeting, when I spoke to the Argentinian lads, I said, I'm a proud Australian. I love my country, right? And I don't want them to lose. I just want us to win, as in Argentina.
Yeah.
And there's a very different feel around that, because if I want that other thing, they're going to think, well, what's wrong with this guy? Like, what's he going to do? Trade in his country? But people are provoking and trying to get that negative response out of you. And I think that that's something that everyone's got to be. Yeah, it affects, the negative commentary affects people's mindset, and I just think that it's so important with everything that's going on that we start to get a better handle on the mental health aspect, and not be thinking that it's something that we can't talk about because it may cause an issue in itself, Mate, I want to ask you, I know we've been talking for a bit and there's a million things I could ask you, but I do want to talk to you about one thing in particular, about leadership. Because I'm a real believer that we've got a real vacuum here at the moment, a void in genuine leadership, and I think that you as a player grew over your time to become an iconic leader, both at Leinster and for your country. And I'm going to tell a little story, and then I'm going to ask you a question, I suppose. I coached a game once for Leinster where Brian was playing, and it was a game against Leicester. which is an English team. And I think it would have been in 2006, maybe. I'm not sure exactly the date. And at that time, I had a bit of a thing going on where the players would put up, I had a bit of butcher paper put up behind each of the players, in our very amateur style locker rooms back then before a game. And players would write on the butcher paper with a marker pen, what they're going to do for their teammates. So it's almost like making a contract between each other. This is what we're going to do for each other in this game. And Leicester was a big target because I think they'd given Leinster a hiding in a European Cup match a couple of years earlier. So there was a bit of fear in there. And I remember everyone had written something on their sheets, and it wasn't obligatory, but everyone did it. And they were all looking at Brian's, and he just left his blank, right? And then we went out to warm up, still blank. And I don't even know if you remember this story. And then he came back in the dressing room, and just as the team was getting together for the team meeting, so everyone was watching, he got his marker pen and wrote up on the butcher paper, "Follow me." And you didn't have to say another thing. We went out there and demolished them out on our home track in Dublin. I don't know if you remember that story, but it really struck me that day, something about you. So I wanted to ask you what you think great leadership is, and what type of leader are you?
I think great leadership can come in plenty of different forms, and I really believe that leadership is not reserved for captains and for those senior players. I genuinely believe that if there was any sort of leadership in me, then it is in everybody else. I was this quiet, shy, unassuming kid. I want to be one of the pack as a teenager. And then, I found myself thrown into the international team, and I became a senior player at a very young age in Ireland because maybe I was one of the more important players, in a bit of a struggling team in the late 90s and early 2000s. And then out of nowhere, I was asked to be Ireland captain. And it was obviously this huge honor, having never captained any team before in my life. So I had no experience to fall back on. But ultimately, what I did was I looked at the captains that I'd been under up to that point, and Martin Johnson with the Lions, Keith Wood with Ireland, even schools captains, and I took little traits of theirs that I thought were effective, that really resonated with me, and I tried to amalgamate all of them. And I think leadership is something that you continue to learn, and there's always new aspects to hone and to add to what you're doing. The easiest part of leadership for me is rolling your sleeves up and getting involved with your team, and showing that you're there for one another, for particularly in the slog fests. It's from a rugby perspective, it's easy to play when the track is hard and the sun is shining. It's when it's a Friday night over in Edinburgh around Christmas time in the Celtic League, and you're playing with the second team because the internationals are being rested, and you're coming back from injury. For me, that's the day that true leadership shines, because it's harder to do it on that day. I think leadership is something, to coin a phrase of an old captain in Leinster of mine, leadership is something that you do every day. It's not selective on a Saturday afternoon, talking in a huddle and pointing at guys and telling them what they need to do. I think leadership is quiet words with guys, understanding how they work, understanding emotionally what makes them tick, to be able to put an arm around them, to understand what's going on in their lives, to appreciate when they're a bit below par and how you need to pick up a bit of the slack, where someone responds well to a carrot or a stick a little bit better. But I think that's an investment in individuals, and an investment in your team. So, I look now at the things that I'm involved in. Leadership is sometimes being quiet too. Leadership in my TV stuff, when there's lots of chefs, lots of people throwing opinion in. Sometimes there's no point in throwing another one in. leadership is accepting that there's no need to speak, or there's no need to add a further point, even though you might feel as though it might be impactful. Sometimes good leadership is shutting your mouth and just letting a moment take care of itself.
Mate, very well put. Very well put. And on that note, I don't think there's anything else to say. Absolute legend, mate. Although we've spoken here for an hour and a bit of chat, probably about stuff we would never have talked about if we weren't on a radio thing or a podcast or a video cast or whatever they call it. But
I can't believe you drew me into politics as well. Oh my God,
mate,
it's one thing I'd steer clear of, you know?
Everyone can talk to you about footy, mate. That's it. I think the reason I want to know about the things that we talked about tonight, amongst many others, is because you're a real intellect. I'm not saying that just to give you a rap. You like the footy sort of bravado, but you've got a real intellect working inside of that brain of yours. And you're not just 4 times British Lions tourists, 130 odd caps for Ireland, European champion with Leinster. You're a top man, and I really appreciate the time that you've spent with us today. I think everyone's going to really enjoy listening to what you've had to say.
Thanks for having me, Coach.